Chapter 1, The Riddle House. In this chapter, we are introduced to the Riddle House, a place shrouded in mystery and tragedy. The Riddle family was killed 50 years ago, and the gardener, Frank Bryce, was suspected of their murder but was found innocent. However, the villagers still mistrusted him, and the village boys often bothered him. One night, Frank witnesses a bright light inside the Riddle House and realizes that the boys have set a fire. He enters the house and overhears a conversation between Lord Voldemort and Wormtail. Voldemort instructs Wormtail to capture Harry Potter after the Quidditch World Cup. Wormtail suggests using a different boy, but Voldemort refuses, and they discuss the past actions, including the murder of Bertha Jorkins. Frank is horrified by what he hears, and when a giant snake slithers into the room and starts hissing with Voldemort, he is frightened. Voldemort calls Frank into the room and kills him in a flash of green light. At the same moment, Harry Potter wakes up, sensing that something terrible has happened. This chapter sets the stage for the rest of the book, introducing the villainous Lord Voldemort and his plans to capture Harry Potter. We learn about the Riddle House, its tragic past, and the character of Frank Bryce, who becomes a key figure in the story. The scene is full of tension and suspense, with the threat of danger lurking at every turn. The reader is left wondering what will happen next and how Harry Potter will escape the clutches of Lord Voldemort. Chapter 2, The Scar. In this chapter, we are introduced to Harry Potter, a 14-year-old wizard who wakes up with a throbbing scar on his forehead, signaling that Lord Voldemort might be near. The book explains that Voldemort is the leader of the dark side of wizardry, the murderer of Harry's parents, and the reason for his scar. After Voldemort killed Harry's parents, he turned his wand on Harry, but the curse backfired, leaving Voldemort powerless and Harry with a permanent scar. Harry debates what to do about his scar. He cannot tell his relatives, the Dursleys, who hate magic and him equally, nor his friends Hermione and Ron, who wouldn't know what to do. Eventually, Harry decides to write to his godfather, Sirius Black, who was wrongly imprisoned for crimes he didn't commit, including the murder of 13 people and Harry's parents. Harry and his friends later found out that the real culprit was Peter Pettigrew, also known as Wormtail. Harry writes a short letter to Sirius and heads down to breakfast. This chapter sets the tone for the rest of the book, introducing the key characters, Harry and Lord Voldemort. We learn about Harry's past and the significance of his scar, which will play a vital role in the story. The reader is left with a sense of unease and anticipation, wondering what Voldemort's next move will be and how Harry will handle the situation. The chapter also sets up the relationship between Harry and Sirius, highlighting their close bond and hinting at the importance of their relationship later in the book. Chapter 3, The Invitation. In this chapter, Harry Potter wakes up to find his scar throbbing with pain, an indication that Lord Voldemort is nearby. Harry is hesitant to tell anyone about it, not wanting to cause alarm, and decides to write to his godfather Sirius Black. At breakfast, Harry receives a letter from Molly Weasley, inviting him to the Quidditch World Cup and to stay with her family for the rest of the summer. However, Uncle Vernon is furious about the invitation and warns Harry not to expect any special treatment. Uncle Vernon is angry at the letter's arrival, and he makes it clear that he does not want Harry to be around for the rest of the summer. He is particularly irritated by the number of stamps on the envelope. When Harry mentions casually that he must finish a letter to Sirius Black, Uncle Vernon looks frightened and grumpily tells Harry to go. Harry is delighted by the news of the Quidditch World Cup, and he writes a letter back to Ron, feeling optimistic about the rest of the summer. Later, Harry finds his owl, Hedwig, back from a night flight, and Ron's new owl, Pig, in his room, who delivers a note from Ron reminding Harry to be ready to leave for the Quidditch Cup the following night at 5. Harry writes back to Ron, excitedly looking forward to the trip. The chapter highlights Harry's desire to escape the Dursleys, his excitement at the prospect of attending the Quidditch World Cup, and his fear of Lord Voldemort's return. Chapter 4, Back to the Burrow. In this chapter, Harry Potter prepares to leave the Dursleys and attend the Quidditch World Cup with the Weasleys. Uncle Vernon is angry and rude about the invitation, hoping that the Weasleys will dress appropriately for their arrival. When the Weasleys are late, the Dursleys seem to be relieved. However, they are interrupted by loud banging sounds from their boarded-up fireplace. Harry recognizes the sounds as the Weasleys trying to use flue powder to travel through the fireplace network. After a small explosion, the Weasleys arrive in the living room. The Dursleys stare while Dudley disappears, clutching his bottom where a pig's tail had grown during his last encounter with a wizard. Fred and George go upstairs to retrieve Harry's trunk, while Mr. Weasley attempts to make conversation with the Dursleys, who are unresponsive. One of the twins drops a pocketful of sweets on the way back, and Harry and Mr. Weasley are left alone in the living room. They find out that Dudley had eaten one of the sweets, and his tongue is now enlarged. Aunt Petunia tries to pull his tongue out of his mouth, while Uncle Vernon throws ornaments at Mr. Weasley. Mr. Weasley tries to restore Dudley's tongue, but it takes several attempts before it returns to normal. As they prepare to leave, Mr. Weasley warns Harry not to do anything reckless during their visit to the Quidditch World Cup. Harry is excited about the prospect of spending time with his friends and being surrounded by the wizarding world again. Chapter 5, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. In this chapter, Harry travels to the Burrow, the home of his friend Ron Weasley's family. Upon arrival, he is introduced to Ron's older brothers Charlie and Bill, who work with dragons in Romania and at Gringotts Bank in Egypt, respectively. Harry also encounters Percy, the eldest Weasley brother who has recently graduated from Hogwarts and is now working at the Ministry of Magic. Ron admires the older brothers and twins, but is scornful of Percy. After a scolding from Mrs. Weasley for giving Tung-Tung Toffee to Dudley, the group heads upstairs to Ron's room where they discuss Percy's job and the twins' line of magical jokes. They then go downstairs to find Mrs. Weasley cooking dinner and complaining about the twins. Outside, Bill and Charlie are using magic to make tables levitate and crash into each other while Percy yells at them to be quiet. During dinner, Percy complains about a work issue. Mrs. Weasley tells Bill to get rid of his earring, and the twins and Charlie discuss the potential outcome of the next day's Quidditch World Cup. Harry feels content to be with the Weasleys and is excited to attend the World Cup with them the next day. Chapter 6, The Portkey. In this chapter, Harry wakes up early in the morning, and Mr. Weasley, dressed in Muggle clothes, takes Harry and the Weasley children, including Hermione, to the Quidditch World Cup. They must travel early in the morning to avoid being noticed by Muggles. Everyone is grumpy and tired, and the tension escalates when Mrs. Weasley confiscates Tung-Tung Toffees from the twins' pockets. They all walk to Stoatshead Hill, where they meet Cedric Diggory and his father, Amos, and find the Portkey, which will take them to the World Cup. The Portkey, a dilapidated boot, jerks them from the belly button and spins them through the air. When they arrive, only Mr. Diggory, Mr. Weasley, and Cedric are able to land on their feet. The rest of them, including Harry, fall over in a heap. The atmosphere is electric, with thousands of witches and wizards from all over the world, dressed in different colored robes, crowding the campground. Harry is thrilled to be there, and he and Ron are amazed by the variety of people and sights. As they make their way to the campsite, Harry sees the Malfoys, who are attending the event with the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. Mr. Weasley is furious that Fudge has given the Malfoys special treatment. They then find the Weasleys' tent, which is small and cramped, and filled with their family members and various wizarding friends. They are delighted to see Ludo Bagman, who is now the commentator for the Quidditch World Cup, and who encourages Harry to enter the Triwizard Tournament, which will be held at Hogwarts that year. Chapter 7, Bagman and Crouch. In this chapter, Harry, Hermione, and the Weasleys arrive at the Quidditch World Cup site, where they struggle to act like Muggles and blend in with the rest of the wizarding community. The Ministry wizards are frantic about keeping their presence a secret, and they frequently have to erase the memory of the Muggle site manager, Mr. Roberts. Despite the challenges, the group sets up the tents and explores the vastness of the wizarding world, passing by various teams' supporters and their unique campsites. Later, the group is visited by Ludo Bagman, the head of magical games and sports, and a retired Quidditch player. Ludo is excited about the upcoming game and places bets with Fred and George, who wager all their money on Ireland winning but Victor Crumb catching the snitch. The group is interrupted by the arrival of Barty Crouch, Percy's boss, who is a master of over 200 languages. After Percy offers him tea, Crouch departs, leaving the twins excitedly speculating about a mysterious upcoming event at Hogwarts. Harry purchases omnioculars for himself, Ron, and Hermione, and they head to the field to watch the match. As they settle in, the atmosphere is electric with excitement, and Harry realizes that this is the first Quidditch World Cup he has ever attended. The chapter sets the stage for the thrilling Quidditch match, but also highlights the challenges of the wizarding world, including the need to hide their existence from muggles and the complexities of government officials and their power dynamics. Chapter 8, The Quidditch World Cup. In this chapter, Harry, Ron, and Hermione attend the Quidditch World Cup with the Weasley family. While there, they encounter a house elf named Winky, who is saving a seat for her master. Winky tells Harry that Dobby, whom he had freed 2 years prior, has been asking for payment, which is unusual for house elves. Soon after, Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, and the Malfoy family, including Harry's nemesis at Hogwarts, join them in the top box. As the game begins, Irish leprechauns form shapes in the sky and drop gold pieces onto the bleachers, which Ron collects and uses to repay Harry for the omnioculars he purchased earlier. Harry is amazed by the fast-paced game of Quidditch and uses his omnioculars to watch the moves in slow motion and note the names of various plays. The mascots, Bulgarian Vila and Irish leprechauns, become increasingly involved in the game. Crumb performs a spectacular dive for the snitch that fools the other team's seeker and catches the snitch, ending the game in Ireland's favor, despite his team being 160 points behind. The crowds go wild, and Fred and George Weasley go to collect their winnings from Ludo Bagman, who is commentating on the game. The chapter ends with the group leaving the stadium and encountering a group of Death Eaters, followers of the Dark Wizard Voldemort, who have caused chaos and destruction at the campsite. Chapter 9, The Dark Mark. In this chapter, the Quidditch World Cup match between Ireland and Bulgaria continues with excitement. As the game begins, Harry watches in amazement as the players dash through the sky at an incredible speed. Ireland takes an early lead, and Harry uses his newly acquired omnioculars to observe the various plays and movements in slow motion. The Vila mascots of the Bulgarian team reveal their true demonic bird heads, and Crumb performs a spectacular dive for the snitch, ultimately leading to Ireland's victory. However, the celebration is cut short when a group of masked wizards start a riot against muggles and mudbloods in the campsite. Harry, Ron, and Hermione narrowly escape, but the group is accused of conjuring the Dark Mark, a sign of Voldemort's return. The chaos in the campsite continues as the group tries to figure out what is happening. Mr. Weasley comes to their rescue, and they encounter Winky, a house elf whom Harry had previously met. Winky is holding Harry's wand, and Mr. Diggory reveals that it was the wand that conjured the Dark Mark. The group is shocked and confused, and Hermione speaks out about elf rights as Winky is threatened with punishment. Mr. Weasley tries to calm everyone down, but Harry is deeply shaken by the knowledge that Voldemort's followers are still active and may be responsible for the recent pain in his scar. The chapter ends with the group returning to their tents, and Mr. Weasley reassuring them that everything will be okay. However, Harry is left with a sense of unease and concern about what the future may hold. Chapter 10, Mayhem at the Ministry. In this chapter, the aftermath of the Dark Mark incident is shown. The Weasley family returns home and Mr. Weasley goes to the Ministry of Magic to clear up rumors about the event that were published by reporter Rita Skeeter. Meanwhile, Harry tells Ron and Hermione about the pain he felt in his scar and they react with concern. Percy and Mr. Weasley spend the next week working at the Ministry, while the others prepare to return to Hogwarts. Bill warns them about Rita Skeeter's reputation for ruining people's reputations with her articles. The night before they leave for school, Mrs. Weasley brings them dress robes that she has laundered. Ron throws a fit upon discovering that his are second-hand and lacy, which leaves Mrs. Weasley feeling defeated. Harry feels sorry for Ron's financial situation because his parents left him a small fortune, while the Weasleys are always struggling. This situation highlights the economic inequality in the wizarding world and the difficulties faced by those who are not born into wealthy families. As they prepare to return to Hogwarts, tensions are high, and the events of the summer continue to weigh heavily on their minds. Chapter 11, Aboard the Hogwarts Express. In this chapter, the group wakes up to find Amos Diggory's head in their fireplace, reporting that Mad-Eye Moody was caught by Muggle policemen after setting up his dustbins to attack what he thought was an intruder. Mr. Weasley rushes off to the Ministry to handle the situation while the others prepare to leave for King's Cross Station. The Hogwarts students board the Hogwarts Express, where they overhear Draco Malfoy boasting about his father wanting to send him to a dark arts teaching wizard school, Durmstrang. The three friends, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, reunite with their classmates, including Neville Longbottom, who lives with his grandmother and didn't attend the World Cup. During the train ride, Ron is picked on by Malfoy for his lacy and second-hand dress robes, and Malfoy drops a mysterious hint about something happening soon at Hogwarts. Finally, they arrive at Hogwarts, and the first-year students cross the lake in boats with Hagrid, while the older students are taken to the castle in a row of horseless carriages. Charlie Weasley hints that he may be seeing him soon, but it's unclear why. The stage is set for a new year at Hogwarts, and the students are eager to see what it will bring. Chapter 12, The Triwizard Tournament. In this chapter, the Hogwarts students arrive at the school for the start of the new academic year. On the train to Hogwarts, Harry, Ron, and Hermione overhear Draco Malfoy boasting about his father wanting to send him to Durmstrang, a wizard school in Northern Europe that teaches the dark arts. They also discuss various other European wizard schools. Upon arriving at Hogwarts, the students are greeted by Peeves, the poltergeist, who bombards them with water balloons. The first years are sorted into their respective houses by the Sorting Hat, and Dennis Creevey, the younger brother of Colin Creevey, is sorted into Gryffindor. During dinner, the headmaster, Dumbledore, announces that the annual Quidditch Cup will not take place this year and instead, the Triwizard Tournament will take place, a competition between representatives from each of the three largest European schools of wizardry, Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, and Durmstrang. The students are excited about the tournament, and Harry imagines himself entering and winning. However, Dumbledore emphasizes that the tournament is dangerous and only those aged 17 or older can enter. As the chapter progresses, the new defense against the dark arts teacher, Mad-Eye Moody, is introduced. He is a grumpy-looking man with one large swiveling eye. Dumbledore explains that the Ministry of Magic has taken enough precautions to ensure the safety of the Triwizard Tournament, but the Weasley twins are skeptical. That night, Harry falls asleep imagining himself as the champion of the Triwizard Tournament, cheered on by Cho Chang, a Ravenclaw girl on whom he has a crush. Chapter 13, Mad-Eye Moody. In this chapter, the students begin their classes at Hogwarts. They learn herbology with Professor Sprout, who teaches them how to collect Bubotuber pus. In Care of Magical Creatures, Hagrid introduces them to the blast-ended Scroots, mysterious creatures that nobody knows how to care for. In Divination, Professor Trelawney predicts Harry's future, but Harry finds the class less than enlightening. After lunch, the Slytherin students ridicule Ron's father, which leads to a confrontation between Malfoy and Harry. Mad-Eye Moody enters the scene, stopping Malfoy from attacking Harry by turning him into a ferret. The students find the blast-ended Scroots fascinating yet puzzling, and Draco Malfoy complains about everything as usual. Harry tries to show interest in Hagrid's class, despite finding it difficult to do so. Hermione, on the other hand, spends her time in the library after lunch, leaving Harry and Ron to attend divination class. Professor Trelawney predicts that Harry's worst fears will come true, but Harry is unimpressed with her predictions. At dinner, Malfoy reads an article written by Rita Skeeter that ridicules Ron's father, which leads to an argument between him and Harry. Mad-Eye Moody intervenes and punishes Malfoy by turning him into a bouncing ferret. Despite McGonagall's warning not to transfigure students, the Weasley twins speak in awe of Moody's teaching abilities in defense against the dark arts. Chapter 14, The Unforgivable Curses. In this chapter, Harry notices Professor Snape behaving meekly around Professor Moody, who is now teaching defense against the dark arts. Moody's first class is eagerly anticipated by the Gryffindors, who are curious to see what he will teach. Moody explains that they will be studying curses instead of creatures, and demonstrates the 3 unforgivable curses using spiders as examples. Harry is disturbed by the final curse, which killed his parents. Neville is particularly affected by the second curse, and Moody takes him aside after class to give him a book on herbology. Later that night, Hermione introduces the Society for the Protection of Elfish Welfare, SPEW, and hands out badges to Harry and Ron, who are less than enthusiastic about the idea. Hedwig arrives with a letter from Sirius warning Harry to go to Dumbledore if his scar hurts again, which makes Harry feel anxious and guilty for placing Sirius in danger. Neville is also restless that night, although Harry does not notice. The chapter shows the contrast between Moody's straightforward approach to teaching curses and Snape's more abusive behavior towards his students. It also introduces the idea of SPEW and Harry's continued concern for his scar, which hints at the overarching plot involving Voldemort and the danger he poses to Harry and his loved ones. Chapter 15. Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. In this chapter, Harry writes to Sirius telling him to stay where he is, and denies feeling any scar pain. When there is no response, Professor Moody places the Imperious Curse on his students to teach them how to ward it off. Harry is pleased to experience a pleasant, unconcerned feeling when under Moody's control, but, realizing that he is being ordered to jump on the table, he resists the curse and crashes into it instead. Moody is delighted with Harry's performance, but Harry is left feeling humiliated. As classes get busier, a poster announces the arrival of delegations from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang on October 30th. Hermione continues her work with SPEW, which many view as a joke, and Ron argues with her about Cedric Diggory's intelligence, accusing her of liking him only because he is handsome. Harry receives word from Sirius that he will be coming and staying hidden. On the day of the delegation's arrival, Hogwarts students line up to welcome them. Beauxbatons arrives in a flying carriage, and the oversized and attractive headmistress, Madame Maxime, greets Dumbledore and leads her students into the castle to warm up. Durmstrang arrives in a ghostly ship, and the shrewd-looking Karkaroff leads his students onto dry land. Ron is awestruck by the appearance of Victor Krum, the Bulgarian seeker. Chapter 16, The Goblet of Fire. In this chapter of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the Hogwarts students eagerly await the arrival of the Beauxbatons and Durmstrang schools. At the welcoming feast, the Hogwarts girls clamor for Victor Krum's attention, while the boys fight over who gets to sit near him. Dumbledore introduces the Goblet of Fire, which will select a champion from each school to compete in the Triwizard Tournament. Karkaroff, the headmaster of Durmstrang, notices Harry and stares, but Moody warns him not to hold up the line. The next day, Fred and George attempt to trick the Goblet of Fire by using a potion to age themselves, but they are thrown out by the age line and sprout beards. Meanwhile, Harry, Ron, and Hermione visit Hagrid, who has inexplicably dressed up and smells terrible. They discuss the tournament and the deadly scroots that Hagrid is breeding. Hermione fails to convince Hagrid to join SPEW, and as they leave, Hagrid becomes distracted by Madame Maxime. After dinner, the Goblet of Fire announces the champions: Fleur Delacour for Beauxbatons, Victor Krum for Durmstrang, Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts, and surprisingly, Harry Potter. The announcement shocks everyone, as Harry is too young to compete and didn't even enter his name. The chapter ends with Dumbledore reassuring the audience that the Ministry of Magic will investigate how Harry's name ended up in the goblet. Chapter 17, The 4 Champions. In this chapter, the Goblet of Fire selects the 4 champions for the Triwizard Tournament. At the welcoming feast, the Hogwarts students are eager to meet Durmstrang and Beauxbatons, with the Hogwarts girls particularly excited to see Victor Crumb. The selection of champions is done by the Goblet, with Dumbledore drawing an age line around the goblet to prevent anyone under the age of 17 from entering. However, Harry's name is unexpectedly selected, despite him not having entered his name. After being selected as the fourth champion, Harry is shocked and confused, as are the other champions. The teachers and judges follow Harry to the back room, where they all express their opinions on the matter. Ludo Bagman is pleased that Harry is a champion, while Karkaroff and Madame Maxime are suspicious and believe that the contest has been rigged. Moody speculates that Harry's name was entered with a strong charm, leading to a heated argument with Karkaroff. Mr. Crouch explains that the contest will have 3 surprise tasks, beginning in late November, with the first task testing the students' daring. Back in the Gryffindor common room, everyone is celebrating Harry as the Hogwarts champion, but Harry is not in the mood to celebrate. When he returns to his dorm room, he finds Ron, who is upset that Harry did not invite him to join the contest. Harry is thunderstruck that Ron does not believe him, causing a rift in their friendship. Chapter 18, The Weighing of the Wands. In this chapter, Harry struggles with the aftermath of being chosen as a champion in the Triwizard Tournament. Although he denies having entered his name in the Goblet of Fire, many students don't believe him, and he faces scowls and insults from everyone except Gryffindors. Harry's best friend Ron is also upset with him, believing that Harry secretly entered the tournament without him. Harry's only ally seems to be Hermione, who supports him and tells him that Ron is just jealous. In potions class, Harry gets into a duel with Malfoy, resulting in Hermione's teeth growing down past her chin due to a misfired spell. Snape punishes Harry and Ron with detention, but Hermione is left untreated for her injuries. Later, Harry is interviewed by a pushy journalist named Rita Skeeter, who twists his words to paint him in a negative light. Harry also attends the weighing of the champion's wands, and it's revealed that his wand contains a feather from the same phoenix as Voldemort's wand. Finally, Harry receives a mysterious request to meet someone in the Gryffindor common room alone at 1 in the morning, 2 days before the first task of the Triwizard Tournament. Harry is suspicious but decides to go anyway. Chapter 19, The Hungarian Horntail. In this chapter, Harry struggles with the fallout of Rita Skeeter's article about him in the Daily Prophet. He is mocked by other students, who believe the exaggerated claims of the article, and Ron refuses to speak to him. Harry spends most of his time in the library with Hermione, but even there he is not safe from attention as Victor Crumb starts studying with him, drawing admirers along with him. During a visit to Hogsmeade, Harry wears his invisibility cloak to avoid attention, but Mad-Eye Moody is able to see through it and tells him to meet Hagrid in his cabin at midnight. Following Mad-Eye's instructions, Harry watches as Hagrid and Madame Maxime escort a group of men deep into the Forbidden Forest. He overhears that the dragons being guarded by the group are the first task of the Triwizard Tournament, and that one of them is particularly dangerous. Later that night, Harry meets with Sirius through the fireplace in the Gryffindor common room. Sirius warns Harry about Karkaroff, a former Death Eater who is now a professor at Hogwarts and may be investigating the first task for himself. He also suggests that Moody's arrival at Hogwarts may have been the target of the dustbin attack, and speculates that Voldemort may have used Bertha Jorkins, who was last seen in Albania, for information. Ron interrupts their conversation, causing Harry to throw a "Potter stinks" badge at him in anger. Harry is left frustrated and unsure how to proceed with the first task, but with this new information, he begins to piece together the possible dangers he will face. Chapter 20, The First Task. In this chapter, Harry and Hermione desperately search for a way to defeat the dragons for the upcoming task, but they find nothing helpful. Harry contemplates leaving Hogwarts, but he realizes that going back to the Dursleys would be far worse. The day before the task, Harry warns Cedric about the dragons, which surprises and angers Cedric. However, Mad-Eye Moody pulls Harry aside and praises him for trying to even out the playing field. Moody advises Harry to use his strengths, which leads Harry to realize that he needs to use his broomstick to fly past the dragon. On the morning of the task, the 4 champions are taken to the forest and given a model of the dragon they will face. The goal is to get the golden egg from the dragon. Harry is the 4th to face the Hungarian Horntail. He listens as the crowd reacts to the other champions' attempts, and when it is his turn, he flies past the dragon on his firebolt broomstick, getting the egg in record time. Although all the champions eventually obtain their eggs, Cedric and Fleur are injured, and Krum destroys some of the dragon's eggs in the process. Ron is overjoyed when Harry reunites with him after the task. The champions are informed that the golden egg will give them a clue for the second task, which will occur in 3 months. Harry is relieved to have the task over and to know that he has time to prepare for the next challenge. He walks back to Hogwarts with Ron, feeling happy and content. Chapter 21, The House Elf Liberation Front. In this chapter, Harry sends a letter to Sirius describing his success in the Triwizard Tournament's first task, where he outsmarted the dragon by flying past it on his firebolt broomstick. Back at Hogwarts, the Gryffindor common room is filled with jubilation as students celebrate Harry's accomplishment. However, when Harry opens the golden egg, it produces only a deafening noise. Meanwhile, Fred and George Weasley's pranks turn Neville into a giant yellow canary. A few days later, Rita Skeeter arrives at Hogwarts and requests an interview with Hagrid. Despite Hagrid's reluctance, she manages to persuade him to do the interview. Harry continues to enjoy divination class now that he and Ron have reconciled their friendship. After class, Hermione takes the boys to the Hogwarts kitchens, where they encounter Dobby and Winky, who now work at Hogwarts. Dobby is excited about his freedom and newfound ability to earn wages, while Winky feels disgraced and misses Mr. Crouch. Dobby reveals to Harry that the Malfoys are dark wizards, while Winky refuses to speak ill of Mr. Crouch, but she does mention that Ludo Bagman is a bad wizard. As the trio leaves the kitchen, Dobby promises to visit Harry, and Hermione hopes that Dobby's newfound freedom will inspire other house elves to demand better standards for themselves. Chapter 22, The Unexpected Task. In this chapter, Professor McGonagall announces that the Yule Ball is quickly approaching and that the champions and the dates will need to dance. Harry needs to find a date, but he refuses every girl who asks him, as he wants to ask Cho. During Hagrid's interview with Rita Skeeter, he talks mostly about Harry, and Harry learns this in Transfiguration class. The teachers are relaxing in most classes, except for Hermione, who is still working hard. Ron and Harry, on the other hand, have yet to find dates and are feeling the pressure. Christmas has arrived, and the castle is beautifully decorated for the occasion, including everything but Harry and Ron's dates for the Yule Ball. Harry finally asks Cho, but she has already agreed to go with Cedric. Meanwhile, Ron asks Fleur, who ignores his request. The boys sit in the Gryffindor common room, still dateless and desperate, while Hermione enters the room. Ron suddenly realizes that she's a girl and asks her to come with one of them. Hermione declines, stating that she already has a partner, but she does not reveal who it is. Finally, Parvati Patil, a pretty but annoying Gryffindor girl, enters the common room and agrees to be Harry's date, while also setting up her twin sister as Ron's. Ginny Weasley has agreed to go with Neville, but Hermione still has not revealed her partner. Harry is excited to have a date, but he still feels a little disappointed that he was not able to go with Cho. Chapter 23, The Yule Ball. In this chapter, the Yule Ball arrives and Harry is forced to find a date. He wants to ask Cho, but she has already agreed to go with Cedric. The boys struggle to find dates until Parvati Patil agrees to go with Harry, and sets up her twin sister with Ron. Meanwhile, Hermione's teeth look different after Madame Pomfrey shrinks them. On Christmas Day, Harry receives a gift from Dobby and the students have a snowball fight before the ball. At the ball, Harry is seated at the head table with the other champions and the dates, including Cedric and Cho, and Krum and a beautiful girl who turns out to be Hermione. Ron accuses Hermione of fraternizing with the enemy and angers his date, causing her to leave. Harry and Ron leave to avoid listening to Percy, and while outside they overhear Snape and Karkaroff discussing something mysterious. They then find Fleur passionately involved with her date in a rosebush. Harry and Ron also overhear Hagrid confess to Madame Maxime that he is half giant like her, but she is insulted and leaves. As the ball comes to an end, Cedric advises Harry to listen to his egg while taking a bath. Harry returns to the common room to find Ron and Hermione fighting, with Hermione telling Ron to ask her to the ball next time before someone else does. Chapter 24, Rita Skeeter's Scoop. In this chapter, Harry tells Hermione that Hagrid is half giant, but she is unconcerned about it and dismisses the prejudice against giants. In Hagrid's absence, the Care of Magical Creatures class is led by Professor Grubbly Plank, who introduces a unicorn to the girls. Malfoy shows Harry and Ron the latest article by Rita Skeeter, which reveals Hagrid's heritage and paints him as a dangerous and irresponsible teacher. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are angry about the article and try to confront Hagrid, but he doesn't answer the door. During the next visit to Hogsmeade, Ludo Bagman offers Harry help with his egg, but Harry declines. Bagman reveals that Mr. Crouch has stopped coming to work. Rita Skeeter appears in the Three Broomsticks pub, talking about an upcoming article in which she plans to ruin Bagman's reputation. Hermione, Harry, and Ron confront her about the article on Hagrid, and she snaps at Hermione before leaving. Harry fears that Hermione will be the next target of Skeeter's attacks. The trio rushes to Hagrid's house, where they find Dumbledore consoling him. They convince Hagrid to return to teaching, and he agrees. As they leave Hagrid's house, he asks Harry about the progress with his egg, and Harry realizes it's time to take Cedric's advice, even though he's wary of him now that he's paired off with Cho. Chapter 25, The Egg and the Eye. In this chapter, Harry uses the Marauder's map to sneak into the prefect's bathroom and listen to the Golden Egg's message underwater. He hears a song that tells him to retrieve something from the Mere People in the lake. As he exits the bathroom, he accidentally steps on a trick stair and drops both the egg and the map. Filch appears and takes the egg, while Snape accuses someone of being in his office. Moody arrives and quickly realizes that Harry is under his invisibility cloak. He takes the map and egg and sends the other two observers off to bed. Moody questions Harry about who the map showed in Snape's office, and Harry tells him it was Mr. Crouch. Moody becomes alarmed and asks to borrow the map. As they head to bed, Moody tells Harry that he is a sharp boy and should consider becoming an Auror. This chapter is important because it reveals more information about the Triwizard Tournament's second task and also introduces the idea of Harry potentially becoming an Auror. Additionally, it highlights the growing tension surrounding Barty Crouch and his presence in Hogwarts, as well as Moody's increasing involvement in the events at the school. Chapter 26, The Second Task. In this chapter, Harry confides in Ron and Hermione about his encounter with Moody, and they speculate about why Moody or Mr. Crouch might be keeping an eye on Karkaroff and Snape. Harry sends a letter to Sirius updating him on what's happening at Hogwarts, and they plan to meet during the next Hogsmeade visit. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are still unsure about how he will survive the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. The night before the second task, Harry spends time in the library trying to find information that could help him. Ron and Hermione are mysteriously summoned away, leaving Harry alone. 10 minutes before the task, Dobby arrives with gillyweed, which Harry eats to help him breathe underwater. He dives into the lake and finds the village of the Mere People, where he sees the 4 hostages, including Ron and Hermione. Harry uses a rock to free Ron and waits for the others to be rescued. Cedric and Krum eventually come for the other hostages, but Fleur's sister is not rescued. Harry fends off the aggressive Mare people with his wand, carries Ron and Fleur's sister to the surface, and receives high marks from the judges for being the first to arrive and waiting to ensure all the hostages were rescued. Fleur thanks both Ron and Harry and kisses them, and Hermione is so preoccupied with Harry that she ignores Crum's gesture of removing a water beetle from her hair. Harry is grateful to Dobby and plans to reward him with lots of socks. Chapter 27, Padfoot returns. In this chapter, Ron is hailed as a hero for his part in rescuing Gabrielle, Fleur's little sister, from the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. Meanwhile, Harry receives an invitation from Sirius to meet in Hogsmeade over the weekend. In class, Harry overhears a conversation between Snape and Karkaroff that seems to involve something suspicious happening on Karkaroff's upper arm. However, Snape quickly sends Harry away before he can learn more. During their meeting in Hogsmeade, Sirius shares information with Harry and Ron about Mr. Crouch, who was once a ruthless crusader against Voldemort and is now the Minister of Magic. Sirius explains that Mr. Crouch's son was convicted as a Death Eater, given a short trial, and imprisoned in Azkaban, where he eventually died. Mr. Crouch's career was ruined, and Sirius suggests that Mr. Crouch may be hoping to redeem himself by catching another dark wizard. Sirius also advises Ron to write to Percy, Mr. Crouch's assistant, to try to find out more information. As the meeting comes to an end, Sirius leaves with the promise to keep in touch, and Harry and Ron head back to Hogwarts, deep in thought about what they've learned. Harry wonders if Karkaroff's suspicious behavior in class is related to Mr. Crouch and his quest to catch dark wizards. The chapter ends with the trio determined to learn more about what's going on and to try to piece together the puzzle. Chapter 28, The Madness of Mr. Crouch. In this chapter, Harry, Ron, and Hermione visit the kitchens to thank Dobby for the gillyweed and find Winky, a miserable and drunken house elf, sitting in a corner. She reveals that her master wants her to protect his deepest secret, leaving Hermione upset about Winky's situation. The trio procure food from the elves to send to Sirius, but they still can't shake off the unsettling feeling that something is not right with Winky's master. Meanwhile, Hermione is receiving hate mail for supposedly breaking Harry's heart, while Ron is feeling embarrassed about being poor. They discuss how Rita Skeeter could have overheard the conversations, with Harry suggesting that someone could have bugged them. However, Hermione thinks it's impossible within Hogwarts and continues to brainstorm. Later, the champions are called down to the fields and are informed that the next task is a maze and obstacle course with the Triwizard Cup at the center. On their way back to the castle, Krum asks Harry if he and Hermione are romantically involved, to which Harry replies that they are not. At that moment, Mr. Crouch appears in the forest, talking to himself incoherently, mentioning Bertha Jorkins and the Dark Lord. Harry leaves him with Krum and rushes to get Dumbledore. When they return, they find Krum stunned and Mr. Crouch gone. Hagrid and Moody arrive, and Karkaroff accuses Dumbledore of treachery, leading Harry to be sent back to his dorm under Hagrid's supervision. Hagrid warns him about associating with foreigners like Krum. Chapter 29, The Dream. In this chapter, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are at the Owlery, sending an update to Sirius and discussing the mysterious events of the previous evening. Professor Moody later informs them that Mr. Crouch did not show up on the Marauders map, despite his odd behavior, and warns Harry to be careful, as someone dangerous may be after him. Sirius also sends a warning to Harry to prepare well for the third task. With the help of his friends, Harry takes the warning seriously and trains hard for the upcoming task. Several days later, in divination class, Harry has a disturbing dream of Voldemort reprimanding Wormtail for making a mistake and revealing that someone is dead, and that he plans to kill Harry and feed him to his pet snake. Voldemort then inflicts the Cruciatus curse on Wormtail, causing Harry to wake up screaming and clutching his scar. In a panic, Harry charges towards Dumbledore's office, where he can hear Fudge and Moody arguing with the headmaster. Moody spots Harry through the door and announces his arrival, and Harry tells them about his dream. Dumbledore calms him down and assures him that they are taking steps to protect him. Fudge leaves, still convinced that Dumbledore is making up stories about Voldemort's return, but Moody and Dumbledore remain determined to protect Harry. The chapter ends with Harry feeling a sense of dread and wondering how much longer he will be safe at Hogwarts. Chapter 30, The Pensive. In this chapter, Harry uses Dumbledore's pensive to witness a series of trials where the accused are interrogated and judged. He sees Karkaroff being questioned by Mr. Crouch, who is offering him a deal to be set free from Azkaban in exchange for the names of other Death Eaters. Karkaroff reveals Snape's name, but Dumbledore vouches for Snape, saying he is a spy for the good side. Then, Ludo Bagman appears in the chair and pleads his innocence, and the audience votes to forgive him. Finally, Mr. Crouch's son is accused of subjecting the Longbottoms to the Cruciatus curse, and his father sentences him to a lifetime in Azkaban. After being pulled out of the pensive by Dumbledore, Harry tells him about his dream and his suspicion that Voldemort is near and dangerous. Dumbledore agrees and informs Harry that Bertha Jorkins, Mr. Crouch, and a muggle named Frank Bryce's disappearances may be traceable to Voldemort. Harry also learns that the Longbottoms mentioned were Neville's parents, who went insane after being subjected to the curse. Dumbledore answers Harry's questions about Bagman and Snape, stating that neither has been convicted of any dark activity since then. Dumbledore bids Harry goodbye and good luck on the third task, indicating his trust in Harry's ability to handle whatever comes his way. This chapter reveals the complex political landscape of the wizarding world and the challenges that Harry and his allies face in their fight against Voldemort. Chapter 31, The Third Task. In this chapter of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry reveals to Ron and Hermione what he witnessed in the pensive. They spend their time in empty classrooms practicing hexes before the final task of the Triwizard Tournament. However, things take a turn when Rita Skeeter writes an article claiming that Harry is disturbed and dangerous, leaving Harry to wonder how she could have overheard what happened in divination. Hermione jumps up and runs to the library, realizing something important. The families of the champions arrive at Hogwarts to watch the final task, and Bill and Mrs. Weasley come to watch Harry. The final task of the Triwizard Tournament is a giant hedge maze. Harry and Cedric are tied for first place, so they go first, followed by Krum and Fleur. Harry's path through the maze is surprisingly quiet until he hears Fleur scream. As he runs forward, he encounters one of Hagrid's Scroots, which is aggressive and 10 feet long. Harry passes it but then hears Krum mutter, "Crucio," causing Cedric to scream. Harry burns a hole in the hedge and saves Cedric by stunning Krum. The two Hogwarts boys continue, shaken, through the maze. Harry passes a Sphinx, answers her riddle, and sees the Triwizard Cup ahead. Both Harry and Cedric run towards it, but they are blocked by a giant spider that they defeat together. However, Harry breaks his leg in the process. After they can't decide who should take the trophy since they both helped each other out, they touch it at the same time, both winning. To their surprise, the cup turns out to be a portkey, and they are transported to a graveyard where Voldemort and his followers are waiting for them. Chapter 32, Flesh, Blood and Bone. In this chapter of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry and Cedric find themselves transported to a mysterious graveyard where they come face to face with a hooded figure carrying what appears to be a baby. In a sudden and brutal turn of events, Cedric is killed by the figure, who Harry recognizes as Wormtail, while Harry is tied to a tombstone of a man named Tom Riddle. Harry watches as Wormtail uses a giant cauldron to resurrect Lord Voldemort, dropping a scaly, red, and snake-like object into the boiling water. As Wormtail continues the resurrection process, he summons dust from Tom Riddle's grave, slices off his right hand, and drops it into the cauldron, saying, "Flesh of the servant." Then, he draws blood from Harry's upper arm and adds it to the cauldron, saying, "Blood of the enemy." From the cauldron emerges a tall and thin figure that Harry immediately recognizes as Lord Voldemort. Harry knows that his worst fears have been realized as Voldemort stands before him, having returned to life. With Cedric dead and Voldemort resurrected, Harry's situation has become increasingly dire. He is alone in the graveyard with the Dark Lord and his loyal servant, Wormtail, and must now face the consequences of what he has just witnessed. The chapter ends on a cliffhanger, leaving the reader anxious to find out what will happen next in the world of Harry Potter. Chapter 33, The Death Eaters. In this chapter, Harry witnesses Voldemort's return to power. Voldemort examines his new body and marks Wormtail with the Dark Mark. He then welcomes his Death Eaters, who have apparated in a circle around him, and notes that many have betrayed him. Voldemort punishes one of his Death Eaters, who begs for forgiveness, with the Cruciatus Curse. He rewards Wormtail for his loyalty by giving him a new right hand. Harry notes that one of the Death Eaters is Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father. Voldemort promises to call upon the Dementors and loyal prisoners in Azkaban to aid him. Voldemort then reveals his history since his defeat at the hands of Harry Potter. Voldemort failed to kill Harry due to the power of his mother's sacrifice. This caused Voldemort to flee his body and inhabit the bodies of snakes to survive. He then possessed Quirrell to try to retrieve the Sorcerer's Stone, but was thwarted by Harry Potter. After years of being alone and weak, Wormtail returned to him with information about a faithful Death Eater who could help him. Voldemort killed Bertha Jorkins, and with Wormtail's help, he found his faithful servant and ultimately brought Harry to him to ensure his rebirth. Voldemort ends the chapter by placing Harry under the Cruciatus Curse and commanding Wormtail to give Harry his wand. The pain is more intense than anything Harry has ever experienced. The stage is set for the continuation of the battle between Harry and Voldemort. Chapter 34, Priori incantatem. In this chapter, Harry faces Voldemort in a deadly duel after escaping his grasp with the help of the portkey. Harry realizes that the only spell he knows for dueling is Expelliarmus, and Voldemort quickly places him under the Cruciatus Curse, causing him immense pain. When he refuses to answer Voldemort's questions while under the Imperious Curse, Voldemort becomes furious. Harry stands up to die fighting, and as they both cast spells, their wands' light beams meet and lift them into a golden dome of light, where Harry hears Phoenix music telling him not to break the connection. As the bead of light travels across the connection between Harry and Voldemort, it touches the tip of Voldemort's wand, causing a shadow of a hand to emerge, followed by shades of Cedric, Frank Bryce, Bertha Jorkins, and Harry's parents. They tell Harry to hold on, and Harry's mother quietly instructs him to let go only when they linger long enough to give him time to touch the portkey and return to Hogwarts. Cedric asks Harry to take his body back to his parents. Harry nods and pulls his wand away from the connection, causing the light dome and Phoenix song to disappear. The shadows of the victims remain and close in upon Voldemort while Harry rushes to grab Cedric. Just as Voldemort is approaching Harry ready to strike, Harry summons the Triwizard Cup to him with the Accio charm he learned for the first task. He grips Cedric's body and feels himself spinning away. In the distance, he hears Voldemort's cry of fury. Chapter 35, Veritaserum. In this chapter of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry is in shock after the death of Cedric Diggory and is carried to the castle by Moody. Once in Moody's office, Harry explains that Voldemort is back and Moody reveals himself to be the Death Eater who placed Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire and rigged the tournament to ensure Harry would win. Moody then confesses to stunning Fleur and placing the Imperious Curse on Krum, instructing him to finish off Cedric. He then attempts to kill Harry before Dumbledore, Snape, and McGonagall burst into the room and stupefy him. Dumbledore orders Snape to fetch Veritaserum, instructs McGonagall to tell a large black dog to wait in his office, and takes a key ring from Moody. He opens the 7 locks on the trunk in the room, revealing a sleeping, disheveled man, the real Alastair Moody. Dumbledore explains that the imposter Moody had been making polyjuice potion from the real Moody's hair and drinking it from his hip flask to assume his appearance. Suddenly, Snape returns with Winky, who cries out, "Master Barty." Dumbledore drops some Veritaserum into the sleeping man's mouth and wakes him up, asking him to speak. Young Barty Crouch explains that he switched bodies with his dying mother with Polyjuice Potion and lived under an invisibility cloak under the watch of Winky. Bertha Jorkins figured out what was going on, and the elder Mr. Crouch modified her memory. Voldemort broke the charm when he encountered her in Albania. At the Quidditch World Cup, Barty took Harry's wand and cast the dark mark into the sky. Voldemort advised him to disguise himself as Moody and go to Hogwarts to rig the tournament. He kidnapped Moody, kept him alive to use his hairs for the potion, and learned his ways and mannerisms. Meanwhile, Wormtail and Voldemort had moved into Mr. Crouch's house, where they kept Mr. Crouch under the Imperious Curse. Barty found Mr. Crouch on the Marauders map, stunned Crumb while Harry was gone, killed his father, transfigured him into a bone, and buried him. He then hurries over to help when Dumbledore, Harry, and Fudge congregated near the forest, wondering what had happened. Winky sobs inconsolably while Barty grins insanely, saying that now that his master has returned, he himself will be honored beyond all dreams. Chapter 36, The Parting of the Ways. In this chapter of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore takes charge after the disastrous events at the graveyard. He ties up Barty Crouch and sends Alastair Moody to the hospital wing, while Harry accompanies him and Sirius to Dumbledore's office. There, Dumbledore explains the connection between Harry's wand and Voldemort's, and Fawkes heals Harry's injuries with his tears. Dumbledore commends Harry for his bravery in recounting the events and sends him to the hospital wing to rest. In the hospital wing, the Weasleys are waiting for Harry, and Dumbledore instructs them not to question him. Madame Pomfrey gives Harry a potion for dreamless sleep, but he is awakened in the night by an argument between Fudge and Professor McGonagall. Fudge is in disbelief about Voldemort's return and accuses Harry of hallucinating. Dumbledore advises Fudge to take necessary precautions against Voldemort's return, but Fudge refuses to do so, leading to Dumbledore's decision to part ways. Snape shows Fudge his own dark mark, confirming Voldemort's return, but Fudge still refuses to take action. He leaves Harry's Triwizard winnings on his hospital bed before storming out. Dumbledore then calls upon the Weasleys, Sirius, Snape, and Lupin to join him in his battle against Voldemort. Harry tries to give his winnings to the Weasleys, but they refuse and Mrs. Weasley hugs him tightly before he falls back asleep. Chapter 37, The Beginning. In this chapter, Harry has a difficult meeting with Cedric's parents the morning after his death. He offers them the Triwizard Tournament winnings, but they refuse. A few days later, Harry, Ron, and Hermione visit Hagrid, who has reconciled with Madame Maxime and is planning to do a mysterious task for Dumbledore over the summer. Hagrid gives them some wise advice to prepare for what's to come. On the night before leaving Hogwarts, the Great Hall is decorated in black to mourn Cedric's passing. During dinner, Dumbledore reveals to everyone that Cedric was murdered by Voldemort and that Harry risked his life to retrieve his body. He emphasizes the importance of the Triwizard Tournament in promoting magical understanding and that Cedric's death serves as an example of the dangers of dark magic. As the students prepare to leave on the Hogwarts Express, Ron asks for Crumb's autograph. Hermione shows Harry and Ron a beetle in a jar, which she caught as an unregistered animagus, Rita Skeeter, who had been gathering false information for her articles. Malfoy and his friends interrupt them, taunting Harry for being on the losing side. In response, Harry, Hermione, Ron, and the Weasley twins cast minor curses on them, knocking them out. The Weasley twins explain to Harry and his friends the truth about the blackmailing fiasco, revealing that Ludo Bagman paid them in leprechaun gold and that he was in financial trouble with goblins. At the end of the train ride, Harry gives the twins his Triwizard Tournament winnings to help with their Weasley's Wizard Wheezes business and to buy Ron new dress robes. They gratefully accept the gift, and Harry returns to spend his summer with the Dursleys.